and welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove. We're back in studio and I'm joined by a 75% fit Taylor Rockwell. Hello, buddy.
Hello. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so your voice is good enough to go, but we might not get 90 minutes out of you.
Probably not.
Probably not.
There's maybe a 90-minute episode, which just means that you'll be finishing out the final 15 minutes.
Yeah, we'll sub you out at 75.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So first,
I talk plenty.
Do want to let people know we do apologise that this third of the Premier League midterm reports is, I think at this point, a week late.
Yes.
Yeah? But it is here. Better late than never.
Yes.
So on today's episode, we're going to be giving the grades to Manchester United all the way through to alphabetically at the end, but first in our hearts, Wolverhampton Wanderers.
That works for me. We're starting with that with Manchester United. But first, we should talk about a little bit of Premier League news that we missed while we were in Chicago / doing these mid-season reviews.
Yeah, so on one of our mid-season reviews about Huddersfield Town, we talked about it's not going well for Huddersfield.
No.
The strikers can't score,
this is true.
etc. But David Wagner is definitely the man. They shouldn't get rid of him. And then he was gone.
And then he was gone.
Yes.
Yes.
Worth noting, he was not fired.
Which is the key thing.
It sounds like he went to the board and said, I can't do this anymore, essentially.
Yeah, which is a big difference, because what we talked about on the show was that it didn't feel like if they sacked him, there was somebody else who could come in and sort of save the season. It felt like...
Well, Sam Allardyce is willing to try.
I'm sure he is, and I'm sure they're probably looking in his direction. But it does seem like it was the case that he basically was like, I kind of just don't have the heart for this right now or the motivation for this right now. And when you're in a relegation fight or trying to get into a relegation fight is, I guess, more appropriate for Huddersfield, then you've got to have that level of intensity that maybe he just couldn't muster.
I like the idea that they're trying to get in a relegation fight, but the other team's like, no, sit down. This isn't for you.
Or more so that I think they need to start winning a couple games to even get into a fight.
I think the best take, I can't remember, I don't know who's credit to, the best take on this is that football management is hard. Yep. Right? And if you really just feel like this is not for me and I'm not helping, maybe it's good to step aside. I mean, I'm sure David Wagner will come back somewhere. We'll continue to have a stellar management career. So I think there's no shame in saying, hey, I'm not helping this year. It's better if I step out.
Well, that may kind of prematurely answer the question I was going to ask you, which is actually a question that Jason Davis put out to Twitter yesterday. His question was, semantics aside.
We're stealing Jason's question.
We are, because I'm curious to hear what you think, because I really did stare at this Twitter poll for a while. Semantics aside in terms of is David Wagner American or not. Play for the U.S. national team. I'm saying he's American. The question was, how long will it be until we see another American coaching in the Premier League? I think the options were 0 to 5, or fewer than 5 years, 5 to 10, and 10 or more, and then there was something else.
I know this poll because I answered it. I clicked fewer than 5.
Really?
Yeah, just feeling optimistic. But it might be 5 to 10.
But it might also be, I feel like you've already answered, because it could be David Wagner getting a job a year or two down the road with another Premier League club.
It could also be that. Yeah,
I said
a club
5
with
to
more
10.
A club with more resources, I think, could give David Wagner a go, and they know his style. If someone's looking for a German pressing style coach, like a Klopp Jr. type figure, I think David Wagner's really attractive to someone.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I proposed on my Twitter account, not on ours, because I didn't want you to see all the negative responses that it would inevitably bring about. Maybe he could take over at Bournemouth if Eddie Howe were to go somewhere, say maybe Tottenham. Spurs fans didn't like that idea. And
someone whose second name was Howe said, I will not be moving to England.
I think it was that if you're going to live in a world where Pochettino leaves, we can talk more about Pochettino and Spurs in a bit, then you'd rather him go maybe to Madrid than Manchester United if you're a Spurs fan.
Oh, and if that happens, the carousel starts moving.
Yeah, it does.
Right. There's been some movement in the carousel at Manchester United.
There has.
Shall we start there?
Let's do it.
All right, Ted, I'm going to start with you.
Actually, do you mind if you start this time? Because I'm curious to hear what your grade is for Manchester United.
Okay.
I don't mean to cut you off, but it's more so I can't tell if my homerism or my too much of fandom has factored into this grade.
So I should say full disclosure that Taylor is a Manchester United fan. So my original grade for Manchester United when we were going to do this last week was N/A. Incomplete. We won't know until after the Spurs game.
Okay.
Now I'm going B-.
Okay.
For Manchester United, if you think of the entirety so far of the 2018-19 season. Here's the sort of report I would give at the parent-teacher conference for Manchester United. I would say they had a very negative attitude for the first part of the school year and their work was really suffering. But lately they've adopted a much more positive attitude and results have improved.
Yes. I would agree. I think I had them as a D+, C- until the Tottenham game.
Yeah.
Now I'll give them a C- is about where I am for the exact same reasons.
Because it seems low to me.
It does, and I compare it with Southampton, who I feel like are in a very similar like category in terms of what they've done this season. I think the difference being that Southampton...
Essentially a managerial change that suddenly they look a lot better.
Yes, but I feel like Southampton went out and identified who they think will be their long-term solution. They gave Hasenhüttl a 2.5-year contract. For Man United, it felt like they were sort of like, we'll figure this out. Maybe we'll get a director of football, but we got to get Jose out. We'll bring in somebody who will kind of engender a lot of goodwill. And it still felt like a lucky appointment. Even if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer becomes the new Sir Alex Ferguson and is there for 26 years or whatever, it still feels like an appointment that came about through luck as opposed to a well-reasoned search.
That's interesting. And I think makes sense given how haphazard Manchester United's sort of hiring of coaches and players has been in the past few years. So I agree with that. I would say the reason I gave them the B-, like a reasonably high grade after seeing the Spurs game is that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's first 4 or 5 games, you really could say like, he's gone for this new attacking style. It's like a 4-2-3-1 with Pogba as the 10, and it's been really exciting. Lots of forward passes, lots of risks taken, but the quality of players and the confidence, and they have a bit of arrogance and swagger about them, was enough to see off what Bournemouth, Cardiff, Newcastle, Huddersfield, I can't remember who they played exactly, but there was no one big up there, right?
That's the gist of it,
But I think it was the same shape and the same style every time. What's got me feeling really good about Solskjaer at Manchester United is the Spurs game, the way he didn't just roll out that same formation and say, go for it, which I kind of was worried that that's what he was doing. He had a specific but not too specific tactical plan to exploit Spurs, right? And it was, we don't want to do a full game review, so, and correct me if you think any of this is wrong, it was to go with Rashford and Martial as wide forwards against Spurs, Lingard as what I think is an actual false 9, as in he would sort of stay central, but then would drop deep into midfield to either connect with the ball or to block off passes to Harry Winks. And then Rashford and Martial would not track back, so that when Spurs sent their fullbacks forward, Rashford and Martial could exploit that space, right? That's the very quick version of what they did. So just the fact that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has a specific way to use his players to exploit what he sees as an opposition weakness, that makes me think he might be really onto something. I want to compare him. So I know I'm talking a lot, but I want to compare him to Zinedine Zidane in a way, because that's a specific tactical instruction that isn't some like big philosophy. It isn't like a big gegenpressing thing that needs a name. It's just, we've got these guys. They do that. Let's do this. You know what I mean? That's the way I saw Zidane managing Real Madrid in the glory years.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think you can look at what they did against Spurs as a simple, not necessarily simple, but a relatively simple, in the grand scheme of things, adjustment that you can execute with a couple days of training, and then people can get behind. And it does feel like
it doesn't take 6 months to practice it to get it right.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think the big thing there is that the vibe definitely, I mean, it is obvious that Mourinho needed to go. It is very clear from the way the players are now playing that when you just feel beaten down when Paul Pogba is on the bench, you can just see that lack of energy, that lack of enthusiasm. When you're doing the defensive job that Mourinho wants you to do and you're winning, I think that goes a long way towards keeping people confident. But as soon as the results turn, then it suddenly is like we're putting in all these hours of training and work, and I'm reading a million page document to be prepared for this game, and I can't remember everything, and then I get yelled at, and then he makes fun of me in the media, versus, hey, we're going to do this and this and this, then counterattack and try to score a goal.
Yeah, and imagine if you're one of those wide attackers and you're just focusing on tracking back and making sure the opposition fullbacks don't provide too much of a threat, but then you're losing anyway, or you're not getting to do the attacking thing that you think is your strength, and you think that's why the club bought you. Then you suddenly just feel like, what is even the point of all this? And the thing I loved about the Spurs game is what Martial and Rashford did as those wide forwards, in that they was the specific instruction was don't track back, stay high, get ready to attack. It's the very opposite of what Jose Mourinho asked them to do, and it worked. It's the most anti-Mourinho thing possible was Solskjaer's instructions, and there's a glorious irony to that. Take note, Alanis Morissette. That's what irony really is.
And it first of all, nice reference there. Second of all, and it goes back to, in my mind, to like Jon Stewart's point about the political candidates that he most enjoyed covering were the ones that knew they couldn't win, because it allowed them to speak more freely. You don't have to give the kind of canned answers. You can speak truly because no one really expects that much of you. And it does feel a little bit like contrasting, say, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer with Dave Sarachan. I feel like brought in kind of under similar situations of a very much famed coach who is expected to turn everything around, being kicked out for different reasons, but still the same. And it feels like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has kind of taken that and said, there's a decent chance I'm not here, but I'm going to do what I want to do. And I think you look at, say, Marcus Rashford now starting instead of Romelu Lukaku, and you kind of can't question Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because if you're looking at people who are going to score goals for Manchester United, he has the history and the pedigree to be able to say, like, no, this is what I wanted of a player. And it seems like that faith has been returned. I
would say Solskjaer got a little bit lucky in that Lukaku was injured when he took over. And then Rashford, I mean, obviously he's got the best out of Rashford. And so now there's a very easy argument to make of, no, this is my starting striker for this reason, right? But you also saw, I might be wrong because we only watched this game once, right? We didn't do our normal rewatch. We watched this in our hotel room, Man United Spurs. In the second half, didn't Solskjaer's Man United go 4-2-3-1 and later employed Lukaku as a more traditional Lukaku, like stay up there, be a target man, take the pressure off, centre forward. So he has found a role for Lukaku. It's not as if he's banished. It's just that...
Banished?
I want to give it some poetry. It's that he's shown a bit of flexibility. Like, this is how we play with Rashford. This is how we play with Lukaku.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense to me. And it seems like he is keeping most of the squad happy. It does feel like maybe we're starting to get some of the reports of players who have been told or have kind of deduced that they will not be heavily involved this season.
Do you want to name some names?
Marouane Fellaini is the one. I initially had Ander Herrera as a player that a lot of clubs should be looking at to bring in, because he felt like the kind of all-energy, very dynamic midfielder that a lot of teams could use.
Turns out Man United could use him.
Indeed, and are. So it does feel like if we're looking forward, I do think that one thing they could be doing is thinning out the squad a little bit, because there are going to be lots of players in there who you could maybe sell right now because it's in a state of like flux that maybe it doesn't look quite so much like, oh no, they're not good enough, we don't want them, but more so, we're not really sure what we want, so sure, put in a bid for Marouane Fellaini or somebody like that.
So my recommendation for them is maybe not to do anything. Right? Because I mean, I think there are enough quality players there that it'd be nice to just see what Solskjaer does with them for the rest of the season. It still will take him longer to realise, oh, maybe we do need an extra this or that, right? And then I think the bigger thing is that they need to bring in a director of football.
There it is.
That's the main thing, right? Like, maybe just enjoy whatever Solskjaer does for the rest of the year, but just focus on getting the very best director of football or technical director or whomever, will be in charge of player recruitment going forward. Because it can't be Ed Woodward, right? He is not a football man, and it can't be Jose Mourinho or a manager like that. You don't want to give another manager that much control, right? You want to get a new setup that, even if it's the Man United way, maybe it's a Ferguson era player like Solskjaer, it's still better to have someone with an overarching vision in charge of player recruitment.
At this point, he would be the only player that I would be comfortable from the Ferguson era taking over as a manager.
Not Mark Hughes?
Not so much, no. Nor Roy Keane, nor Ryan Giggs, nor Gary Neville.
Solskjaer is the guy right now, right? And kind of a surprise, but
It is, and I'll say that because you look at the photos of him talking to Marcus Rashford and Jesse Lingard, two guys who came through the academy, and you can see, maybe this is me wanting to see it, there's a distinct possibility it is, but I feel like you can see that level of, like, this guy gets it. This guy's been in the locker room in these big games. He's scored these big goals. I'll listen to what he has to say. That's always been the knock against Jose Mourinho, is that when push comes to shove, he hasn't been there as a player. So for him to talk to you in a way that he does, it's not always justified in those big name players' minds.
That makes sense.
It feels like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has endeared himself very well right now. I would love for him to get the permanent job if it makes sense, but I do think I'm with you that a director of football is the priority for Manchester United to then make that decision or not make that decision.
And then you also have 6+ months of evidence about 6 months of evidence of what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer actually does. Because even though the Spurs result is encouraging, right? Like, I'm comfortable giving a grade, or more comfortable after seeing it. It's still the truth that maybe David De Gea kept Manchester United in it in the second half. That could have gone a different way, right? That could have gone a different way, and we'll be talking about, they lost 4-1 to Spurs.
And
so give another 6 months, you'll get you'll have a larger data sample, essentially, to decide whether Solskjaer is the big-time coach that Man United needs.
And I would say I'm kind of glad we didn't record a quick take, hot take reaction to that Man United's win over Spurs, because in that moment, I was sort of frustrated by the way the coverage was of, like, it was all David De Gea, because I did feel like some of the saves were a bit more routine. There have been a few different good breakdowns of all of his saves. Jermaine Genius, I believe, for Match of the Day did a great one, pointing out that, and Ben Foster tweeted this at the time, that, like, yes, some of the saves are routine, but they're routine because of where his positioning is.
Yes.
So I really have come around to the idea that, that could have been a very different game. First half was significantly different from the second. So it's not like, things are all hunky-dory. And again, that's why my grade is a little bit lower than yours, because while it seems like things have improved and harmony has returned and Paul Pogba is happy, it's still, I'm not quite ready to say, like, yep, this is it, because even though he's won 7 in a row, the wheels could come off and they could be knocked out of the Champions League, bad run of form, suddenly they're in 7th, and the season is kind of where it was when Solskjaer took over.
All right. Anything else to say on Man United before we move on to...
I really hope that doesn't happen. I really want it to be Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I love him as the coach.
At the very least, it's going to be enjoyable to watch Manchester United for the rest of the season, right? It gives me an extra game that I think, oh yeah, I want to see what happens in that game, which was not a feeling I had. This is a neutral. That's not a feeling I had when Mourinho was coach.
I would agree with that. Yeah. One final thing. I don't think... It's been talked about a lot on from Man United fans and Man United subreddits and stuff. It's worth noting another key thing that flies under the radar is the return of Mike Phelan, who was the longtime first-team coach for Sir Alex Ferguson. And I just want to say that I'm not naive enough to think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer between the time he was Cardiff manager to a struggling Molde manager to now doing really well at Manchester United. It's not just him. It's that they've brought in people who are familiar with the system, familiar with the club, and I think that's gone a long way. And I think a director of football, if brought in, should probably have those same connections and keep those connections around.
All right, let's move on.
Let's do
to Newcastle United.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give my grade first. Are you ready?
Yep.
They are 18th in the Premier League.
Yep.
Let's think about that. They're in the relegation zone. I am going to give a B- to Rafa Benitez.
Okay.
But an F for the club ownership.
I was a little nicer on both accounts. I had a D for Newcastle and a B+ for Rafa Benitez.
Okay. What does yours average out to? Mine averages out in my head to a D.
Yeah, I think
it may not mathematically work.
I think it still does. I think it still is overall when you're looking at the entire club and the team and the players and everything else. Yeah, one manager does not raise them up that much.
So
it's like Rafa Benitez is like the attendance grade, where 10% of the class grade is attendance. Even if that's a B+, if 90% of the rest of the grade is not good, then you're going to get a not good grade.
So the way I see Newcastle United is Rafa Benitez is very good at setting up a team with a defensive shape, teaching everybody their role, getting quite disciplined, and making that the thing that makes the team work, right? But even that, in the Premier League, that gets stretched to its limits, right? And with the owner, Mike Ashley, definitely looking to sell the team, not looking to invest almost at all in new players for Rafa Benitez to work with. He's just doing what he can with what he's got, and the result is watching Newcastle defend in a tight 4-4-2, a 4-5-1, a 5-4-1, and just holding on for dear life every week, and mostly ending up conceding and losing because there's not enough offered on the counter-attack. And it is torture to watch.
It is. And here's my explanation for why I think things are so bad. They drew their FA Cup tie with Blackburn, which means there'll be a replay. And the resounding sentiment from that was an expletive shouted loudly because they don't want any more fixtures than they have to play because they're already struggling. So yeah, that to me, the idea of oh no, we still have a chance to advance in the FA Cup for a club of the stature of Newcastle right now, at least, that the response was no.
Not another game of football.
Exactly.
That's not what we want to do at this football club.
So with things as bad as they are, you mentioned Mike Ashley there. One thing I'd like to kind of pause on for a moment and discuss. We both have been talking a little bit about the Sunderland Till I Die documentary.
Yeah.
My wife was watching it with me and she was asking, why don't people just stop going? Why do people continue to attend these games where it just feels like you're just being punished, where it feels like it's depressing? Daryl, for a person who grew up in England, I'd like to, if you could, explain a little bit about why Newcastle continues to get decent-sized crowds for a team that doesn't seem like they really care about those crowds.
Before I answer your question,
or an owner, I guess.
I want to underline the point. Before we started recording, the last bit of research I did was to check on Newcastle's attendance. About 50,000 plus every single game to watch their team defend and concede and drop down the table.
That's got to be top 6, maybe,
plus.
In terms of attendance? That's got to be up there.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
So you're asking, why do fans... Yeah. Margaret's asking, why do... I mean, I've heard she's a legend.
She is.
Why do fans keep going? And
she woke me up saying I'm a legend.
I think there's all the cliches, right? About when she heard the Dan Abrahams episode this morning. There's all the cliches about, football's a passion in England and all that sort of stuff, right? I will say, I grew up in England. I did not grow up in Newcastle or Sunderland. My understanding is that in those two towns, which are right next to each other in the northeast, just in case people don't know, it's more...
The Tyne-Wear Derby.
Yeah, exactly. It's more up there because those are reasonable sized cities, right? But in my understanding, the football team in Newcastle and the football team in Sunderland is the biggest thing in the town, right? Like if you live in London, there's lots else going on. If you live in Birmingham, like Aston Villa is not the only thing, right? There's another football team for one thing, and there's a load of other cultural activities and things to be proud of. I'm not saying there's nothing to be proud of in Newcastle and Sunderland, but the biggest thing in town, the thing that the town's reputation seems to depend on, is the success of the football team. And that's why 50,000+ people turn up to watch a terrible Newcastle team every single week.
And that's why, in my mind, it's almost a vicious cycle. Because Mike Ashley does what he does. The fans are upset about it, are angry about it, but they're going to keep going because it's their thing. It's the one thing they have. So they're going to keep going.
It's tied into the identity of the town.
Yeah.
Which means, is a really deep thing.
But it means if you still have 50,000 people going through those gates and buying concessions and buying scarves or whatever, then there's still money there. And so for Mike Ashley, there's not that much of an incentive to sell because he can still eke out a profit. On top of that, you have a manager in Rafa Benitez who could be managing in a lot of other places. I think is being pretty well paid to manage there, although we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But then when Rafa Benitez keeps them up, it's kind of a miracle. And with other clubs, it would be like, oh my gosh, it's a miracle he kept them up. Now let's reinvest and make sure we don't go through that again. For Mike Ashley, it's like, well, you did it once. Keep doing it.
Yep. And so here's my question. I looked at Newcastle's team this year, Newcastle's team last year. They finished, I believe, 10th last year. They finished around mid-table last year. So I could see from a Mike Ashley heartless businessman perspective, just saying, you got roughly the same things to work with.
Yeah.
Just do it again. Well, to be fair, he is waiting to sell the team, but I think he's asking for far too much, right, is the thing. But I think his thing is he expects Benitez to keep them in the Premier League while he sells a Premier League team. He'll have a tougher time selling a Championship team. The only difference I could see, big difference, between Newcastle 27-18 and 2018-19 is Dwight Gale is gone and Salomon Rondon is in.
Right.
That's the only major change. Most of the playing personnel is very similar, apart from their main striker has changed. And in my head, Dwight Gale, he didn't score that many goals. How many goals did he score last year? I think it was like 6 goals in the Premier League last year. But he was quick, right? He was a danger on the break. I think he linked up with Ayoze Perez, who was able to exploit some of the danger that Gale caused. Salomon Rondon is much more of a slower, target-forward, hold-up kind of guy. And my guess, I haven't watched a lot of footage, but my guess is that Newcastle are just a lot less deadly on the counter after they do all that defending, because they've got Salomon Rondon just chesting it down, as opposed to Dwight Gale running in behind people.
It does feel like they could use a hybrid, like maybe say if they were able to get Aleksandar Mitrovic, that would be good. Oh no, wait, they sold him. There's also that element of like, I think Rafa Benitez didn't rate him or didn't want Mitrovic at the time, but then there's certainly the asking price that came into it.
22 million or something is what Fulham offered. Mike Ashley's going to take that, right?
Of course.
Just to finish my Rondon Dwight Gale point, I think this underlines everything. Rafa Benitez asked for Salomon Rondon. But I think the idea was that you'd also keep Dwight Gale, right? Salomon Rondon had, I think, a relegation release clause of £16.5 million. Not bad for an international striker who's proven in the Premier League.
In this day and age as well.
Newcastle refused to pay it. And the deal that was eventually negotiated is you can have him for £2 million if you also loan us Dwight Gale. I think it was a loan back and forth with £2 million. But that's not what Rafa Benitez asked for. He asked for Dwight Gale and Salomon Rondon. Mike Ashley was too cheap. Instead, he loses Dwight Gale, gets Salomon Rondon. So that's an example of how Benitez is just working with what he's got, and every time he thinks he's got something, Mike Ashley takes one of the pieces away.
Exactly. And it's also telling to me that, like, I feel like there's a decent chance that Rafa Benitez said to him, like, if we can get Salomon Rondon in and keep the pieces we have, like, then like that will help us score more goals. That will help us stay up. Yeah. And Mike Ashley heard that and was like, well, he didn't specifically say he needs me to hold on to Dwight Gale so I can make a change. And that is, like, maybe this is a standard thing in all Premier League manager contracts, but it's worth noting Rafa Benitez, out of contract after this season, has a £6 million clause where he has to repay if he quits.
I didn't know that.
So if he quits,
Why did he sign that?
Because he wanted a job, I guess. Because he expected there to be money coming in. Because he was told there'd be money coming in. But so
they didn't say from you.
Yeah, exactly. But so it's in this position where he kind of has to stay there. Yeah. But because Mike Ashley can sort of trot along with the club as it is, he's not going to get any like replacements or any sort of reinforcements. And I think that's why you've seen this downturn, is because if you struggle through a whole season, but you have this idea that if we stay up, then the money will come, then there'll be more players. And even if you're that player...
You talking about players or fans?
Everything. but I mean that, like, let's go for players, for example. Okay, say you're DeAndre Yedlin, and suddenly Newcastle sign a right back who is on paper better than you or is expected to start over you. It's going to make you raise your game. You're going to have to play that much better because suddenly you know you have competition. But if instead they're signing an unproven player on loan because Chelsea wanted to give him some minutes... I don't know if that makes you raise your game as much. And so the whole team can kind of get a little bit more complacent. You also feel like, oh, things aren't going to get better. We're not going to get more money. It's going to be kind of the retread of what it was last season. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make you want to fight that much more. It goes back to the David Wagner thing of if you take away some of that fire and some of that passion, and instead it's like, yeah, I guess we're just going to do the same thing instead of we're going to win every game and we're going to fight for every inch. You just don't have that killer instinct anymore.
I want to talk about DeAndre Yedlin for a second.
Sure.
We have an American starting every week for a Premier League team, getting 50,000 people. And it seems we're not that excited about it. And American soccer fans are not that excited about it. American soccer media is not that excited about it. And I think that says a lot about the sort of malaise, I guess is the best word, around Newcastle. It's not a feel-good story that an American right-back is playing in front of 50,000 people every other week in the Premier League.
And I think the reason...
weird, right?
It is... Maybe if you wanted to spin it as a positive, it's a sign that we've grown a little bit, that it's not... The standard isn't just like, hey, he's in there, he's playing, so everything's good. I think it's also the case that when you watch footage of DeAndre Yedlin, I think we both agree now. I really fought you for a long time on this one. I've really come around to the idea that if this is a Newcastle team that's well-funded and has a little bit more money, I don't think there's any chance he's starting.
Yeah.
Just because, like, go look at what he did against Chelsea this weekend, where he is clearly told to show Willian to the end line. Willian wants to cut back and shoot with that right foot. It's what he's going to do every time. DeAndre Yedlin shapes up to cut away the end line so Willian can easily cut inside.
Yeah.
Like, that's just...
Does Willian just do a little fake to the end and then cuts back and then scores?
And it's just, it's bad defending. It's amateur defending. And it can be a thing...
Amateur's harsh, but...
it's not far from it.
He got paid to do it.
If I know a person, we've played against players who are all right-footed and they're on their left foot, you keep showing them to their left foot.
Hey,
like, you know to do that.
Sam Nah might be listening.
There we go. I yell it every time he gets the ball. So this, I say that though, I'm not trying to pick on DeAndre Yedlin, but what I'm trying to say is when you look at a team like Southampton or a team like Manchester United, it was clear that those players had quit playing for the manager, and thus there just wasn't that level of intensity, that a pass that should have been completed that was played to somebody else, that's a player sort of just not having the focus and not really feeling up for it anymore because they're no longer feeling that manager. In this case, I feel like the mistakes you see from Newcastle so routinely are sort of Rafa Benitez doing what he can do, but then a defender who probably should be playing in the Championship is instead slicing a clearance straight up in the air and giving their opponent an opportunity to score.
Okay. So what can be done about it? What are our recommendations for Newcastle United Football Club?
I would say if you really wanted to, and if you're Mike Ashley trying to raise that, like, the value a little bit, I would say bring in at least one marquee player, say Miguel Almiron, to bolster fan interest, raise the value, create a little bit of better vibe around the stadium. Mm-hmm. But again, it doesn't seem like they're going to do that, and it feels like there's some Mike Ashley tomfoolery happening with that deal.
Would Miguel Almiron help?
Yes.
Like, say they have to spend 25-30 million on it, which is about what they want. Would Miguel Almiron help Newcastle United?
I think undoubtedly yes, because he can play on the break, because he can drop in, help you out defensively, but sort of be that, not necessarily help you defensively, but be present in the defense, but be that player who can get the ball turned and go at a defense and play on the counter and link up with whatever forward happens to be up top. I think he absolutely makes them better because there's just that one more threat that they don't currently have.
My fear is that Mike Ashley looks at it and thinks, he might be a good player, but he's not so good that he's going to save us. So why would I just spend another 20, 30 million pounds when I'm trying to sell this club anyway?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think to me, the big thing is just get Ashley out.
Yeah.
Just find someone to buy the club off of him so that you can start over. My worry is that even if something does, it's been teased for years now, right, that he's going to sell. So we're talking about this as if it's imminent. It's been imminent for 2, 3, 4 years, right? I think it's very unlikely that a sale goes through before the end of the January transfer window. So you're probably going to end up with this group of players fighting against relegation for the rest of the season.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And that's where I think if you're going to go with this group of players, I do think you need to augment it a little bit, and that's where I think loans come in. And that's where I think a loan for...
Mike Ashley's listening. His ears just poked up.
And I think he should be listening because I think... Again, if you believe the stories that have been coming out, I don't see how Marouane Fellaini doesn't thrive under Rafa Benitez and this Newcastle team. That seems like a loan move that makes an insane amount of sense. I don't know if it can get done because I'm sure there would be some sort of obligation to buy, some sort of clause of if he plays X number of games, and then it's going to be with 5 games remaining in the season, you can't play him anymore because otherwise we'll exceed that and we'll have to buy him.
Here's one bit of business could happen. Have you seen the stories about Isaac Hayden?
No.
So I'd say I wasn't very familiar with Isaac Hayden until watching some Newcastle footage. He's a sort of defensive midfielder, but he's also ends up going box to box quite a lot. I got quite impressed watching him. 23-year-old English midfielder. His partner recently gave birth to their kid in London. Mm-hmm. I think she lives down there. He has asked for a transfer since the summer. He said, I want out. Nothing to do with the team or the manager or anything like that. I just want to live in London near where my partner and my child are. Newcastle's a long way from London, right? I know England's small, but that's a distance. If you can find a club in London to buy Isaac Hayden, bring that money in, and then at the very least you can spend it on Fellaini's wages if you loan him.
Yeah.
Right? That's
I
one
would
bit
say
of business that could happen.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think any sort of business that strengthens the team just enough, because I do think those fans, as we already said, they're going to keep going.
Yeah.
But if you can just give them one or two reasons to have a little bit more hope,
yeah.
you're going to feel that in around the stadium. It goes back to when they started winning games last season, and it felt like, oh, they're going to stay up, and Rafa Benitez has them playing. You could hear commentators would talk about how electric the atmosphere was.
So again, I've never been there, but when I was growing up and first watching the Premier League in like 93, that Newcastle team that was thrilling to watch with David Ginola and Andy Cole and Peter Beardsley and all that going on. It's an incredible thing to hear Newcastle fans excited about their team. Right now they're supporting the team because they're just diehard fans, but when they're actually excited about the team and the team is playing attacking football, it makes the Premier League so much better. So have an attacking Manchester United and a good Newcastle, those would be my two hopes for the Premier League in the next year or so.
And in my mind, they all sound like Brian Johnson, who was the replacement longtime frontman for AC/DC, because he's from Newcastle, even though they're an Aussie band. So I just like the idea of 50,000 people that look and sound exactly like Brian Johnson, all screaming in unison. That's what we need to do, Mike Ashley. So get that job done.
Your voice is starting to sound like Ronnie Scott. So
I think Bon Scott. No,
Bon Scott. Excuse me. So we should think Ronnie Scott was the name of a music club near me growing up.
Okay,
yeah. Bon Scott. Still almost a good joke when you get half the name right. 50%.
I'm pretty sure he died in a not fun way. So thanks for that, Daryl. Thanks for that.
So before we move on, we want to talk about today's new sponsor.
Let's do it, because we are getting into the second half of the season.
Yep.
Champions League is coming back. The pressure is mounting up. But we know the managers want to look good on the touchline. Our sponsor for today can help them do just that.
It's Twillory. Twillory is a shirt company that we're very excited is sponsoring the Total Soccer Show. Not least because when we came to the office today, we had 4 Twillory shirts waiting for us.
One of which was the performance shirt. I know you were wearing that briefly. And I want to say, first off, I did enjoy you claiming credit for Man City's quote-unquote turnaround, because Pep Guardiola is finally wearing the appropriate outerwear.
Yep.
So I feel like I'm going to read you the description of the performance shirt that Daryl was wearing. Tell me this doesn't sound like something Pep Guardiola needs in his life. A game-changing combination of fashion and function that's engineered to deliver superior style in any situation. Crafted from hyper-breathable 4-way stretch fabric, each shirt features CoolMax moisture wicking tech to keep you dry and a proprietary non-iron treatment to keep you wrinkle-free. Wrinkle-free, dry, comfortable, but energetic and ready to go. That's Pep Guardiola. He needs that shirt.
What that copy doesn't capture is that these shirts look good.
They do.
At least when I put it on, I felt like, yep, this is.
Did you feel like you could maybe take over Newcastle and lead them to safety?
I mean, no, because Mike Ashley would not support me.
He wouldn't even buy you that shirt, would he?
If Mike Ashley could buy players in the way that Twillory sells shirts,
bundles,
I think Newcastle could do a lot better. So if you go to Twillory.com, you'll see you can buy one shirt for I think price is very good, about $99. When you buy 2 shirts, 3 shirts, 4 shirts, the price decreases. So the more you buy, the more you save at Twillory.com.
Yep, and I really appreciate things, little details like the free brushed nickel collar stays that are included with each shirt. They keep that collar looking good. So again, if it's wrinkle free, the collar stays sharp. So if you have been managing for 90 minutes, it's going to get warmer as we get into like April, May, June. So that'll keep you looking fresh and put together, even if your tactics are not.
Can I say this may make me sound like a bit of a rube, but I have never seen the nickel collar stays before. All the shirts I've previously had just had bits of plastic in them. These actual like heavy nickel things made me feel like, oh, I have a good shirt now.
Patent pending plastic bits probably doesn't sound quite as good. But what might sound good is that Total Soccer Show listeners can get $25 off their first shirt order by going to Twillory.com/TSS and entering the promo code TSS at checkout.
So that's $25 off, Twillory.com/TSS. That's TWILLORY.com/TSS. And the promo code is TSS. Remember, the performance shirt from Twillory has your back, no sweat, literally.
So thank you to Twillory. Welcome to the Total Soccer Show, and thank you for choosing to sponsor.
Would you be willing for us to do a photo?
Yeah.
Should we take a photo in our Twillory shirts later and we'll post it to Twitter so
Sure.
people can see what the Twillory shirts look like?
That works for me.
Yeah?
All right. But before we do that, we should probably keep rolling on with our Premier League mid-season / a little bit past mid-season reviews. Let's go to Southampton, shall we?
Let's go to Southampton. So Southampton are 16th in the Premier League, which sounds bad, but that's mostly Mark Hughes' fault.
It is.
Mark Hughes was replaced by Ralf Hasenhüttl, the Austrian coach who was working in Germany. You may remember RB Leipzig is the team that sort of he was famous for in the last couple of years. Things have looked a lot better.
They have.
What's your grade?
I'm giving him a C.
I've got C+ for the Hasenhüttl announcement.
That seems probably a little bit more fair because it has been a good turnaround. But it's the same thing for me as Manchester United again, except this time in Hasenhüttl. It feels like they found their permanent manager, knocking on wood here for Saints fans, until another club who wants an exciting pressing manager comes in and tries to sign him.
I've gone C+ because Southampton were using old British textbooks that haven't been updated in 30 years for the first half of the season. They finally got some new textbooks from Austria and Germany, and they're really soaking in all the fresh, innovative information.
Yeah, and I think I know I get your point with Mark Hughes, and I like it, but I would say that it extends to most of their recent permanent managers. I think right now they potentially owe up to £30 million to their fired managers.
Do they really?
Claude Puel, Mauricio Pellegrino, and then Mark Hughes.
Yeah.
All of those managers are fine managers. None of them inspire or really motivate in my mind. They're not that new wave of manager who's going to kind of like have more of a rapport with younger players, but also kind of motivate those players to perform.
Yeah.
Ralf Hasenhüttl, it seems like, has done that from the outset.
I'm not sure he's necessarily young, but I think his style of play
I think he's 51.
Okay, yeah. Oh, so that's youngish for a coach, right? Yeah. But his style of play to me represents this sort of modern, aggressive, pressing approach. And I really like the symbolism of a Premier League team in Southampton doing away with the sort of there was a danger they got on the Mark Hughes, Sam Allardyce, Tony Pulis carousel, right? Yeah. Instead of doing that to try and save themselves, they brought in this more sort of like high energy Austrian coach.
And here's the key thing. Here's why
he still had Red Bull in his bag, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Here's why, though, I think this hire was so smart from Southampton's perspective. Because there's a good Tifo football video that explains tactics under Ralf Hasenhüttl at RB Leipzig.
Yeah.
And the key thing for me was first season in the Bundesliga, they are this aggressive pressing, everybody running, everybody playing as hard as they possibly can. It works well. They qualify for the Champions League. Second season, they qualify for the Champions League. That means more fixtures, and he changes the pressing a little bit. Now they're utilizing the sideline. It's more of a like pushing them wide and then pressing to limit some of the running.
You really did watch Tifo football.
I did. But the thing that I found so fascinating was like, so that's the adjustment he made that season.
Yeah.
Look at what he's doing now. He's sticking with a back three because that's what Mark Hughes wanted to do. That's what he brought players in to do. So Hasenhüttl is doing that, but he's still kind of putting his spin on it and putting his branding on it, or not his branding, but you get my point.
Yeah.
So that it's not a thing where he's forcing players to kind of change everything that they've been doing and relearn this new system. That was the kind of concern about him coming in. And instead, it's this hybrid approach that is making the players comfortable, but also pushing them to do different things.
There's more tweaks than like a massive redevelopment, which is a smart thing when you're brought in mid-season to try and save a team. Right? You don't have time to spare. You can't be like, oh, we'll figure it out by the end of the year. Oh, what, we finished 20th? Oh, well, it'll definitely work in the Championship.
That didn't work so well.
I wanted to just point out the one thing that I saw from watching them. There's a very specific pattern of play that I think is really good and is getting the best out of certain players. So they will press in midfield, right, with say Ward-Prowse or Romeo or Højbjerg or whomever is in there.
That is a question mark for me. Who the two are in there?
But it seems to work whomever it is, right? They will press and win the ball back, and then they immediately play it forward to the centre forward, right? When he's fit, it's Danny Ings. It could also be Charlie Austin or Shane Long, and almost every time that player will then, Danny Ings, the centre forward or whomever else, will then drop the ball back to another midfielder, and then it's Nathan Redmond or is it Stuart Armstrong, the two sort of attacking wingers in the 3-4-2-1, basically, so they're the two. They'll be making a run forward, and they will receive that forward pass. Yep. It's this quick pattern of press, win the ball, give it the forward, he lays it off, midfielder receives the ball, hits one of the wingers on the run. So they have a pattern of play that's pretty straightforward, right? You can work on that in practice and really get it down to a T. Yep. That is absolutely working for them, and you're seeing the very best of Nathan Redmond running at people in space. He's a player I really, really, really like.
Yeah, and I mean, if you need further evidence, it's not to say that Ralf Hasenhüttl has come in and they've won every single game and it's this completely reignited machine, but under Mark Hughes in 22 games, I think they had 3 wins.
Yeah.
They already have 3 wins under Ralf Hasenhüttl in the Premier League.
Here's my my final bit of stats for you. He's been in charge for 7 games now, Hasenhüttl. They've lost to Cardiff, West Ham and Man City, but they've beat Arsenal, Huddersfield, Leicester and tied Chelsea. So 3 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw.
Yep.
That's staying up form.
Yeah.
Right? That's not going to win you anything, but that's going to definitely keep you up.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And then I think if you look at what they did this summer, they spent some money. They signed Yannick Vestergaard for $22.5 million, Angus Gunn for $10 million,
Angus Gunn.
There you go. Mohamed El Yunusi for $16 million. I say all that just to say they backed Mark Hughes. They spent a lot of money. So I think, to your point, it makes more sense for them right now if we're looking forward and what they should do for the remainder of the season. I think it's kind of stay the course. Don't really disrupt. Don't look to bring in a high-profile striker or another creative midfielder. It's going to cost you a lot of money. It's another thing you're going to have to kind of bet in and adjust to. I think it makes more sense to kind of stay the course, maybe offload a player here or there if they don't fit with what Hasenhüttl wants. Then in the summer, because it does feel like they're going to stay up if they stay up, and if he is the manager that he appears to be, then you back him and you kind of go about replacing or reinforcing where he says you need to.
So to summarise, trust Wreck-It Ralph.
Yep.
And enjoy it as the Saints go pressing in.
There we go. Wow, you are on fire today.
I'm going to move us on to Tottenham Hotspur. Tottenham Hotspur currently 3rd in the Premier League on 48 points. I am going to give them a B+, but with a little note in the corner that says to the other teachers, keep an eye on this kid.
Yep.
I'm a little concerned about what's about to happen.
It's the report card where you get a decent grade, but then a lot of the comments are disconcerting. Where it's like needs to practice better work and study habits. In this case, I guess it needs to practice better player signings.
Yeah. So let's go.
I'm very similar, by the way. I have it as a B+ for the manager and the players and a B overall because I think they've been hamstrung a little bit.
So we got ourselves in a little bit of trouble when we did our Premier League preseason previews because we focused very heavily on what happens if Harry Kane is out of form or tired or injured. And obviously they haven't had to deal with that because Harry Kane has been in form and is banging in a bunch of goals.
And also because I forgot Fernando Llorente. Because we were talking about who's going to come in. I don't really know what they do in that situation. You do have Fernando Llorente as the backup, and they'll soon find that out.
So the problem right now is, even though they're 3rd in the Premier League, they just lost to Man United, but I don't think that's a big disaster.
I mean, right? Pochettino said it's the best half of football they've played that second half.
So second half, I just want to go back to that game for a second. After Man United kind of exploited the fullback thing and had nullified Harry Winks by having Lingard cut off, they essentially did the thing that I think Pochettino is best at. This is Pochettino's big strength, I think, is he always finds a way to get Christian Eriksen involved. Right, so Christian Eriksen wasn't seeing that much of the ball when he was farther forward. He came back and played essentially a double pivot. He played alongside Harry Winks, so it gave an extra outlet that couldn't be blocked off. And then Christian Eriksen's on the ball, and then Spurs are ticking again. That's why they had so many chances. It's one of the reasons they had so many chances in that second half. So Pochettino is great at that. But in that game, right at the end, Harry Kane has that ankle ligament injury. He's going to be out till March, which is, I
think he's supposed to return to training in March.
Oh, so he's going to be out for a good while. Son Heung-min is, I think, right now off to the Asian Cup. By the way, we'll cover the Asian Cup, I think, like semi-final, final, when the games get big and exciting. We'll get there.
Sure.
So they're going to lose him as well. So suddenly...
And they already lost him earlier in the season, too.
Yes, they did. Suddenly, Spurs really do, in my opinion, have a striker shortage. It's the one that we sort of warned about at the start of the season. We were wrong about until right now. And I'm interested to see what Pochettino does.
And this is why I say for the players and the manager, it's a B+, and then it really drops to a B because so many of the issues you're talking about and the other issues that have happened this season are sort of their own making that have then been fixed, but they're issues that they should have known were coming. Yeah. For example, I read the Guardians' preview of the season, and the big thing was everything will calm down once they return to their home stadium on September 15th.
Yes.
Here we are.
Actually, I should have shaved a point off for not moving into the new stadium.
Yeah. I mean, but it's that. We knew there were the concerns about Harry Kane. We knew there were concerns about depth. They didn't go out and sign anybody. They still haven't signed anybody. And so it feels like a lot of these problems were of their own creation. I would go so far as to say so many posts I saw talked about the dramatic save of their Champions League campaign, how they only got 1 point from their first 3 games, but then they got 7 points from their next 3 and they were able to qualify. And I would say, but again, that's of their own doing. It's a late loss against Inter Milan. It's struggling to get the points away that then you end up with 1 point. Then you have to work extra hard to kind of combat the position you put yourself in. And it feels like that is something that Tottenham have had to do all season.
Worth saying though, all right, so we agree they played very well second half against Manchester United. Yes, missing Kane is going to be huge. Missing Son Heung-min is going to be huge. But we're again extrapolating out, thinking they're suddenly going to struggle without them.
True.
I would like us to do a little thought experiment that we're Mauricio Pochettino. What do you do with the Spurs forward line in the next few games? Like, what are your options?
See, honestly, I didn't even know that Son was leaving again. So that's a surprise revelation to me, because I assumed it would be just sort of you go with a lot of fluidity and mobility up top in the form of Son Heung-min, whomever else you want to throw in there too, maybe Eric Lamela. Dele Alli can obviously kind of play further forward.
That's one of my suggestions is maybe move Dele Alli farther forward and have him connect things. One of the things with Harry Kane, not just his finishing, his heading ability, his wrestling with people in the penalty area, he's very good at coming deep and connecting, right? So maybe Dele Alli is a solution. Maybe Lucas Moura, if he is back from injury. He's played as sort of a two-man forward. You could do like a wide forward thing, right? Maybe Fernando Llorente. That will be the big test, right?
Appearances, 0 goals so far.
Is he of enough quality at this stage in his career to carry that team for like a month or 2 months while Harry Kane is out?
I mean, and also, is he of the mold you want? It feels like they brought him in against United to kind of be the battering ram, to be the person who could get on the end of crosses and knock some stuff down.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what they want from him from start to finish in a game.
Yeah. Okay, other options. I have seen Spurs linked in the transfer market with Malcolm. You familiar with Malcolm? Brazilian winger, did really well at Bordeaux, looked really dangerous. Can play a little bit forward as well, so he's in that Spurs mould. Currently at Barcelona, but basically not getting picked. He may be available on some sort of loan or transfer. It is maybe time for Spurs to spend some money, right? That's the obvious answer. You're missing Harry Kane for a long time. You might, if things go wrong, you might drop out of the Champions League places. Maybe now's the time to spend some money.
I agree wholeheartedly, because I think also the way I know Pochettino came out and said, I want to be here for 20 years. And you can hear that as, oh, he's going to be there for 20 years. The way I kind of heard that was he's setting it up so that he's not the bad guy if he leaves.
Yes.
He's setting up to say, like, I want to be here for 20 years.
Yeah.
But I need some support. I need some new players. I need some investment. I need signs that what I want will be heard and responded to and not just fall upon deaf ears. And I think this is the window where they need to make sure he knows, no, we'll get you players and we're going to hang on to the players that you want to hang on to. Don't worry. And I think I'm with you then that maybe that means sell Moussa Dembele to the club in the Chinese Super League for a lot of money.
Right? Yeah. And Dembele has not been a more regular part of the team as he has been in the past. I think Harry Winks has kind of stepped in and filled that role.
And has had to, because Eric Dyer's injury means I think he's like one of the few players who can play that role consistently for them.
Yeah.
I would say another one who could do that would be Doucouré from Watford, who has already had, there's a lot of speculation. He has said he wants to go. He has said he wants to play. He said he wants to play in the Champions League is his goal. He's been heavily linked with PSG. And I think they're offering like around 30, 35 million, or that's at least what Watford want. That seems like a reasonable sum to have a midfielder who can come in and really help dominate and spell some players who could maybe use a few minutes of rest.
Oh, so yeah, spend some money, Spurs. Spend some money. The other thing is, this is, I think, kind of a developing story. I don't know all the details. There's a Serge Aurier thing where there was an accusation that he may have assaulted his partner or wife. Yep. I honestly don't know the details of that or exactly what's happened, but that's definitely a developing situation for Spurs.
I believe they've already announced that they're not going to take any punitive action.
Really?
That was the story I saw this morning when I woke up. Whether or not that's true, I guess we'll have to keep up to date.
Yeah, I'm not going to offer any comment without really knowing the details. Okay, anything else on Spurs? Things that they should be thinking about going forward?
I mean, it's a strange commentary on the Premier League and how quickly things change. That if we had done this show 3 weeks ago, it's an A+ for Spurs probably, because they're in all competitions, they're firing on all cylinders, they look like they're going to challenge for the title or will at least be up there in that conversation. And it does feel a little bit more like the way it shifted with the Harry Kane injury and the other injuries they've had. Now it's going to be can they hang on to the top four? Yeah. Can they kind of hold on to that spot?
I'm going to choose to look at this as a test of Pochettino's innovation or resourcefulness is the better word, resourcefulness, to see what he does without Kane and Son. And I wouldn't be I would be surprised, but pleasantly surprised, but not shocked, if he has some weird solution up his sleeve. You know what I mean? That has like Dele Alli and Christian Eriksen up front or something odd that weirdly makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
Necessity is the mother of invention, I believe.
Yes, I'll be interested to see what Mauricio Pochettino does with a sort of a thinner Spurs.
And if I'm being totally honest, but I think that sucks because I think it's another.
You shouldn't have to do that.
Exactly, it's another Rafa Benitez situation of it shouldn't be you've got to figure something out because you're a genius manager. You may be able to do that, but then it's sort of rewarding the situation of the club for not being able to invest, for not having the funds to invest. That you're just sort of riding this manager and hoping that he can figure out a solution when you could have put yourself in a better position, knowing you could have just said, "Look, we're not going to be we're not going to be home for this entire season." And figured things out accordingly. It just feels like the planning has let the team down, and that's more so on the front office than it is anybody else.
I don't disagree, but I'm also going to say Fernando Llorente, top scorer.
Sure.
Well, speaking of being thin up top.
I see what you've done.
I already used this joke once.
But let's use it again.
On Monday's show. If you are going thin up top, if you're worried about losing your hair, we have a sponsor for you, and it is Hims. First of all, you're not alone. 66% of men lose their hair by age 35, but it's not too late.
It is not too late. The thing is, when you start to notice that hair loss is happening, that's the time to take action, because if you wait too long, then that hair is just lost, as opposed to in the process of being lost.
And we have taken a look at some of the Hims hair loss solutions before and after photos, and there's definitely more there after than before.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely true. It's impressive to watch because it doesn't seem like it's just a matter of like combing or perspective or anything like that. It seems like we're seeing genuine results, and that's what people would want when it comes to keeping that hair, keeping that cool, staying in the top 4. Put it that way.
Mauricio Pochettino, take...
he definitely doesn't need to worry about it from what I can tell. But it is always strange. Actually, I will say this. It is really strange to see the player who is maybe reaching that 35, 33 age, and you'll see them like jogging over to take a corner kick, and they turn around and you're like, ooh, that's that bald spot. Like you can start to see the thinning on some of the players who are reaching that age.
And if that's happening to you and you want to do something about it,
cough, Lucas Moura,
then Hims may be for you. I don't know the full science of how it works. Podcaster, not scientist. But I do know...
You are wearing a lab coat, which I thought was a nice touch.
That it is, that's just for show. It is a medical-grade solution. There are generic equivalents to brand name prescriptions, name brand prescriptions, that are more famous. You go through a real doctor, but you don't have to go and visit them. This is sort of done online, where you can communicate with the doctor, and they'll do the prescription, and you will get the medical-grade solution to hair loss.
They're not coming out of a gas station counter. They're not snake oil. They're prescription solutions backed by science. And best of all, our listeners can get a trial month of Hims for just $5 today, right now, while supplies last.
See the website for full details. This would cost hundreds if you went to the doctor or to a pharmacy. If you go to forhims.com/total soccer, that's forhims.com/total soccer.
FORHIMS.com.
/total soccer. Thank you to For Hims for sponsoring today's show. Excuse me, thank you to Hims for sponsoring today's show.
Get it together.
If you want to go and check the show notes for the URL one more time, it's forhims.com/total soccer.
All right, that takes us back to our Premier League mid-season reviews, slightly after mid-season reviews. That moves us on to the 3 Ws, the first of which is Watford, who I am giving a B+ to.
I've gone A.
Okay.
I've gone one better than you.
I think you've been more generous with every single one of these. Maybe it reflects my still slightly 60.
Yeah, I'm just in a good mood.
That's
in a good mood. But I will note, Watford is 7th in the table.
Yeah.
Watford is 7th in the table after being some people's pick for relegation at the start of the season.
A lot of people's pick for relegation.
Yeah.
The only reason why I wasn't more impressed by that 7th is I don't have the table right in front of me, but I think it's they have 32 points, and then very quickly, if they had 2 fewer, they're 13th or something.
Yeah, it is pretty tight. I think when we did the show that had Leicester on it, they were 7th in the table. There's a lot of rotation happening here. But there's a lot to be impressed with, right? Especially with Javi Gracia, I believe how you pronounce it. The coach that came in...
Javi, not Garcia Gracia?
Yeah. Yes, not Garcia Gracia. He came in to replace Silva last season, and things didn't go all that well, right? Results were very, very bad. He has and he's lost Richarlison in the summer because he went to Everton for £50 million.
He lost Tom Cleverley to an Achilles injury for most of the season.
Oh, yeah, he's only recently back, right? But they have figured out, or Silva, Garcia has figured out. Gracia. Oh,
you almost got there.
Javi Gracia has figured out a formation and a shape that works for Watford. He's also figured out a level of discipline that works for Watford. Did you read some of these stories that I read?
I read more about the formation than the discipline. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think you want to go with the discipline first, right? If you are late to training, under Harvey
Gracia,
thank you, it is £100 per minute as a fine.
What?
I mean, the players can afford that. But
that
adds up, right? 10 minutes late, £1,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Or if you oversleep and miss by an hour, you're in trouble.
You are in trouble. So he has instilled a level of discipline, but not in a way where everybody hates him, which I think is a very fine line to try and walk, right?
Yeah.
You're either that guy that everybody hates, or you're the guy that is setting firm rules that you can follow.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, don't be late to training is a fair thing to not do.
That rule stresses me out because then it sort of is like if a player walks out 1 minute late, but maybe there's like a kind of extenuating circumstances. Are there extenuating circumstances, or is it a hard and fast rule? Or are you having to enforce it? You have a stopwatch.
Yeah.
It all feels very stressful.
Imagine if we did that for the Total Soccer Show.
We'd be in trouble.
We'd both lose all our money.
We would owe a lot of money very, very quickly.
It would just be a loss-making operation.
Or we would just actually be on time. Which maybe is kind of the point there, is that if you don't have those rules in place, things can get a little bit slack.
Yeah.
It's why there's it's why I always reference Generation Kill for some reason, the movie about the Marine unit.
You mean HBO limited series?
Yeah, I do mean that. But like the Sergeant Major in that one is like just over the top about their grooming standard, about having like their mustaches, as he calls them, are like too big.
Yeah.
No matter how short they are, they're always too big.
Yeah.
And then you realize like halfway through the point of that is that it gives them, one, rules and discipline, but two, a thing to rally around in their dislike.
Yes.
And not saying they dislike Javi Gracia, the Watford players, but more so if it gives you a sort of set rules. Soccer players are like puppies. They want rules. They want boundaries. They want to know what's expected of them, and it does feel like that's what Watford are doing.
Well, this translates into the formation and the shape, which requires a lot of discipline.
4-2-2
to make it work. The 4-2-2. Yeah, I think I've talked a lot about discipline, so I'll let you describe the Watford shape and formation and style under Harvey Gracia.
There we go. You got it. I mean, it is exactly what I just said. It's a 4-2-2-2. The reason why it's important to kind of say that as opposed to like a 4-4-2 is because of the shape we're talking about. It's the back four. Then you've got the two holding, the two kind of pivots. Then you've got two further forward, a little bit wider.
Yep.
Not fully wide, but wide enough that then you've got the two in front. And it almost makes a weird like barrel shape, if you can imagine it that way, which is important because then it kind of limits your ability to play through the middle. It forces you out wide. If you go into the middle, then you can kind of collapse upon it, and it makes it difficult to play through when you're defending.
I've heard it referred to brilliantly as the pincer press. Mm-hmm. So when the opposition has the ball, because...
Wait, can I do my Tormund?
Yes.
The what?
It's when you approach them from on both sides.
Okay, there we go. So a double envelopment?
Double envelopment, yeah, the pincer press. And we haven't named any of these players, right? Mm-hmm. So at the base of the midfield, the two defensive midfielders, I think is the very basic way, it's Capoue and Decore.
Until he goes to Tottenham.
But right now, these guys are both absolutely wonderful. They stay central. They mostly stay a little bit deep. They're both very hard to get around and then very smart and crisp on the ball when they receive it, right? These are really two well-disciplined players who hold that defensive midfield shape. Then the wide players, they're not really wide players, right? Because they're just farther forward but tucked in. Usually Pereira on the left, I want to say, and Will Hughes on the right seem to be the favoured two.
Sema sometimes spelling Will Hughes. Sema was injured this weekend. That's where Tom Cleverley came in.
But not quite as good, right? Oh, and speaking of discipline, I saw a game where Sema came in and then was subbed out for Tom Cleverley, and Tom Cleverley scored the winner.
That was this weekend.
Oh, was it? Okay,
yeah. Sema was injured.
That's why. Okay, then he gets a pass. But anyway, so the wide guys, Will Hughes and...
that's a Daryl Grove moment right there.
Yeah, Hughes and Pereira, both really talented, right? Both of those guys have a lot of flair, a lot to offer in terms of attack. But Gracia has got them doing this very odd defensive job where they do that pincer press and push in and make things really hard. So I think that's the key to Watford's success for me.
Yep. And then you've got Troy Deeney doing Troy Deeney things.
Troy Deeney, yeah.
And Gerard Deulofeu, formerly of Barcelona, formerly of Everton, but seems to have reemerged as the kind of attacker that Watford needed him to be.
Yeah, and what this allows them to do is have two strikers, which is actually quite a rare thing, right? To just straight up, because you have the 4-2-2-2, you have so many bodies in central midfield that you don't have to worry about like being thin in midfield if you send two strikers up. That's the big advantage, right? And then for me, when Watford win the ball back, because everybody's quite close together, you sometimes get some very nice, quick, like pinball passes as they make their way quickly down the field. It's quite exciting to watch. Or if things get desperate, you send a long ball to Troy Deeney and there's a good chance he wins it and heads it on. They have a very nice plan B.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because I guess their plan C is spend and invest wisely. As you said, they parted ways with Richarlison this summer, also Nordin Amrabat and Maro Zarate. That's £44 million that came in. They spent that on 7 players for £25-ish million.
Yes.
So they still have a net positive transfer spend, which does allow them to spend more if they want to. I don't know if they will, because I do think looking forward, their biggest thing, I've already alluded to it, is going to be holding on to Abdoulaye Doucouré, because he is so important to them, as you said. That said, they have the midfield depth that they could part ways with him, and so Watford are in this position where they should want to hold on to him, but if, say, PSG are offering $45 million or $50 million, they can sort of afford to let him go, knowing that they can reinvest and hold on probably until the end of the season.
So the other thing for Watford, if we're talking transfers now, is that they are part of what's known as the Pozzo Triangle. You know about this? Which is where the same ownership group is involved with Watford, with Udinese in Serie A, and with, I believe, Granada, who are now in the Segunda in Spain, so they're sort of not at the same level as the other guys. But a lot of the signings are already in the pipeline. They've already been signed and loaned out and come back and various things like that. So I actually think Watford is not a team that you'll see make a big splash in January, because I think they have a lot of long-term transfer plans that are all part of the Pozzo Triangle. So do you remember Adalberto Peñaranda, the Venezuelan attacker? Yeah. So he has just got his work permit. He's with Watford. He was loaned last year. I can't remember where, maybe to Spain. But he's ready to go. So you could see Peñaranda in the near future. There's a lot of guys like that are sort of already involved with Watford. You just don't know about them yet.
Yep. So I guess if we're going to say overall looking forward, it's just keep quietly being Watford?
Yes. And maybe since Udinese are in trouble, you might end up with Watford needing to loan players to Udinese. If I was Pozzo right now, I'd be saying, hey, Watford are fine. Send some of those good players to Udinese. They're 15th in Serie A. It's not going well.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a dangerous strategy at all.
Yeah.
You guys are doing great. Let's weaken you a lot.
Yeah, I guess the Premier League's too valuable to lose anybody.
Yeah, a little bit.
Before we move on, there is one guy I really want to highlight. Our friend Pav will appreciate this, especially Greek left-back Holebas. I think he has 6 assists or something. He has had a really impressive Premier League season. He's got a lot of attention. I think he scored a couple of goals as well. So we talk about the narrowness of the 4-2-2, and you think, where does the width come from?
Yep.
A lot of it comes from the fullbacks. One of those fullbacks is 34-year-old Greek left-back Holebas.
Check the back of the head.
Who is, check the back of the head, but also be scared if he's running at you, because he is getting forward and serving in some beautiful crosses and having a few pops from distance. So if you're not aware of Holebas, take a look next time you see Watford play.
All right, Watford A. I'm with you now. And then, since we've given them that, let's move on to the next W team, West Ham.
West Ham United, who are currently 9th in the Premier League and actually not doing that bad. And I'll be honest, this was a surprise to me.
Yep.
I thought things were going badly for West Ham. I have not been paying attention. That is, I should have been. That's part of my job on the Total Soccer Show. I am pleasantly surprised at how West Ham are going under Manuel Pellegrini.
I don't understand it at all.
Were you the same?
Yes,
yeah,
100%. I 100% saw the Samir Nasri signing. It's like, ooh, that is not good. Things are very bad if that's your solution. And instead, here he is playing the number 10, getting the assist for their win against Arsenal.
So here I'm going B+ for West Ham United so far this season.
And keeping with the tradition of this show, I'm going with a B.
All the students will come to me for the grade.
A half letter grade lower than you.
So here's what I like about them. West Ham not only signed Manuel Pellegrini this summer, they also brought in Mario Huzias, the director of football, who has worked with Manuel Pellegrini in the past.
Yep.
And I think that may be the key piece of information I was missing. I think the combination of the director of football and Pellegrini working with him, and they're on the same page, means that West Ham have signed players that looked random at the time. It looked like they're just throwing a bunch of money trying to fix a problem. It seems everyone was bought to play Pellegrini's style.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it works.
I mean, Samir Nasri being the best example, because that's a player who had the year suspension for a doping violation.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like, what? You're signing this guy who was kind of in Exodus in Turkey, in a lower tier Turkish side.
Yeah.
He's the player you want bring you back. Until I remember, he won the Premier League with Man City, coached by Pellegrini.
Yes.
So it makes sense when you have those connections, similar to the gentleman you mentioned whose name was...
Oh, the director of football, his name is Mario Huzias.
Yeah, so it feels like it's a lot of more connected moves than I realized at first that seem to be paying dividends now.
I think I saw this on a really good Tifo football video. One of the things they did is deliberately bought two inverted wingers. So Felipe Anderson, they paid £36 million for, and Yarmolenko. He's
currently their top scorer as well.
Is he? And Yarmolenko, they both play.
Currently not their top scorer.
And yeah, he got injured though, right? So that the only reason he isn't working out is because he got. I think.
Well, you can only have one.
His Achilles
That's what I'm getting
tendon.
at. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what you say. So Anderson on the left with his right foot cutting in. Yarmolenko on the right with his left foot cutting in. There was a plan the whole time. And it seems to be working, especially the Felipe Anderson signing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who is the top scorer, but then you look at the way he is like cutting inside and getting those shots off. But even in this game against Arsenal this weekend, his kind of delayed runs, because you've got Arnautovic up there with Samir Nasri underneath, and it was like routinely Samir Nasri would hold it up, look to shoot, and then he would just kind of lay it off, and it would look like, oh, there's nobody there, and then suddenly Felipe Anderson comes hurtling into shot.
He does go wandering, right? Like I sometimes look at West Ham's shape, and he's supposed to be on the left, but he's drifted central, like as if he plays for Watford. You know what I'm saying? Like he will move around, but I think it definitely seems to be within the system for him to be allowed to do that, to get the most out of him. And I've got to say, everything I watched, I enjoyed watching Felipe Anderson in action. He's got that bit of a hip swivel. He loves going at people. It just seems like everything gets exciting when he gets the ball. And I think having a play like that must be absolute heaven for West Ham fans.
I would agree with that. I would also say that it's probably got to be pretty exciting with West Ham playing in a 4-2-3-1 to have those two, that main pivot, kind of the most important players in terms of everything that's happening on the field, be English ? Because you've got Mark Noble, who's the veteran leader, and then playing alongside him would be Declan Rice, who just signed a new 5-year deal in late December, which should be maybe the most exciting news for West Ham fans, because he's a 19-year-old central midfielder who looks like he could be there for a very long time, or will end up costing a lot of money when someone comes to buy him.
So let's talk about Declan Rice, because he really caught my eye. Not just because he's a big dude, but also he's an athletic guy, right? He really covers a lot of ground to intercept and make tackles. And he's got this thing about him of when he has the ball, he just looks like... This is a weird thing, right? He looks like he's going to do something with it, and he never does anything flash. But it's more like he'll drive forward a little bit and then play a smart pass, right? Just constantly dependable in terms of stopping attacks and dependable in terms of starting them. If you just got that guy constantly doing that in the centre of the park, that you've really got a really key part of your team there.
And now I'm going to jump in to say a scouting report from John Zaldonis. We have him at the very last scouting report today, but it feels like we should just do it now. Declan Rice, who I think John says is 20, so maybe he's 20, Adam is 19. Declan scored his first goal for West Ham on Saturday in a 1-0 derby win over Arsenal. He arguably should have had a brace on the day, but headed wide. Nevertheless, he was the clear man of the match. Still no word, here's the key point, still no word on Declan's long-term international future, but as an Ireland supporter, John says he is not terribly optimistic at this point.
Oh, I wonder if I assigned Declan Rice to John because he asked for an Irish player. So if people don't know the backstory, Declan Rice played, I think for Irish youth teams, played 3 times for the Irish national team, but all in friendlies. I think England contacted him when they knew he could still one-time switch and said, hey, you could be a key part of the England team for years to come. And I think he's thinking about it.
I think he's thinking about it. It has not been helped by then Martin O'Neill, because maybe Declan Rice's head was turned ever so slightly, stopped calling him in and refused to give him opportunities. So now Mick McCarthy coming in, it's going to be on him to sort of repair that bridge.
Obviously as an England fan, I would prefer to get him, I guess, just in an acquisition-y kind of way. I know he was born in England, right? I think he was born in London. So he genuinely does have two teams he could choose. It's not easy being a dual national.
It is not. And I think Mick McCarthy did say he will build the entire Irish team around Declan Rice for years to come. That is a smart approach. I just don't know if it's too little too late, but we will theoretically soon find out.
Something we'll also soon find out is Marko Arnautovic going to stay with West Ham?
Yep.
Because, again, going back to what we liked about what Manuel Pellegrini has done, right? They don't have a big tactical philosophy, except that they have some more basic players like Rice and Noble. They're almost like the foundation of the team. And then a lot of fun attacking talent in front, right? Felipe Anderson, Samir Nasri, and as your striker, Marko Arnautovic, who is thrilling to watch when he's on form, and he's actually very dangerous in terms of finishing, right? He's a really good finisher at this point in his career. He's also making a lot of noise about how he wants to go to China and make loads of money.
Yeah. And I think this is... Initially, I thought this was maybe posturing. Now I think it's maybe both posturing and a little bit reality. And I say that because the reports came out, I think, yesterday that Chicharito has reached personal terms with Valencia, I think it is. But West Ham are refusing to sanction the move. And I'm wondering if that's
in case Arnautovic leaves.
Exactly, because they're suddenly looking at this as like, ooh, that could be real. On Arnautovic's part, I kind of think it's, hey, maybe give me a better contract. Maybe I'm telling everybody else I'm willing to move if the offer comes in. And maybe it is also, I wouldn't mind getting a lot of money to go destroy the Chinese league.
I mean, I'm very confused because Arnautovic has been around a Stoke team that was not doing too well. Then he was at a West Ham team that was kind of odd for at least a couple of years. And suddenly it's a West Ham team that makes sense because Pellegrini has them playing some attacking but sensible soccer. It's a good balance between the two.
Sensible soccer.
It's a perfect place to be. So maybe he is just pushing for a contract improvement because in terms of playing soccer, West Ham is the place to be right now as opposed to China.
And that's why, looking forward, one of my biggest things was that they need to hold on to Marko Arnautovic. Not just because it means selling a striker, having to get somebody else to come in, or you get Chicharito subbing in but playing a different role. It's because there really aren't any easy replacements for Arnautovic. We made a joke,
unless you get Ibrahimovic, who's the real Arnautovic.
Exactly. We made that joke in Chicago that he is sort of Ibrahimovic light. And I would agree with that, except I think he's more mobile than Zlatan Ibrahimovic.
At this point.
Still has as much of an ego, but yeah. And so I don't know who you bring in to replace Arnautovic, or even if you're capable of doing that. On top of that, if you're selling a striker for a lot of money publicly, then every club knows that. And it's like, okay, tack on another 5 or 10 million to the asking price for every one of our strikers.
I think the one thing I would say is just trust whatever Mario Husias and Manuel Pellegrini want to do, because they seem to be spot on with their signings so far.
I agree.
That's our expert analysis, is trust the experts.
Yeah. That works for me. But it's weird to say that they have experts now at West Ham.
Yes. Are you ready for the final team?
Let's just skip over them.
It's my team.
It is.
It's Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. Wolves, they are 11th in the Premier League. They've really fluctuated around mid-table, right? From 7th to 12th to, but this seems about right, mid-table. I am concerned about my grade because I feel like I've put too much pressure on them as a fan, like I'm expecting more. I'm going to give them a B-.
Oh, okay. Now I've gone more generous. I have them as an A-.
There we go.
All right.
I guess actually that makes sense because the alternative to being Wolves is to be Fulham.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's that. I mean, and that is kind of what the question mark was heading into the season, is they sort of won the championship at a relative stroll. So then how do you adjust to the Premier League and adjust what you're doing? And it feels like whereas Fulham have not, Wolves have, and have done so successfully. The reason why it's an A- for me is because, one, they've been slightly erratic / very erratic at times. And two, it felt like the expectations for them was sort of mid-table, which is exactly where they're at. So they're meeting expectations, not necessarily exceeding them. So that's why I have them as an A-.
I think for me, the reason that I knocked off a bit of a grade is I started looking at some of the signings, and they've not been great so far.
Okay.
Like I look at Adama Traore, Wolves' record signing. I think they ended up paying like £20 million for him. He's only 22. But he's basically not been effective in the Premier League and has sort of fallen out of the start. He's had a good run of like being in the starting 11 and has completely fallen out of it again. Leo Dendoncker, the Belgian defender / midfielder, he hasn't played much either. And these are like the two big-ish name signings.
I think he played that win against Chelsea. I'm just saying. Anchored that midfield.
He also played in that loss against Man City.
Well, there's that too.
The only one that's really worked out, it's a player I've really come around on, is Raul Jimenez.
I mean, João Moutinho and Rui Patricio would like words with
you.
And Rui Patricio, your goalkeeper.
Okay.
Those are decent signings.
So I think actually this is a good example of me...
And Roman Saiz on a permanent deal.
...forgetting the positives and maybe focusing too much on the things that don't work out.
A little bit.
This is me being a fan, right? Yeah.
I think so.
Maybe I should hand it over to you since my emotions seem too tied up with this Wolves team.
Okay. But I think that's fair because, I mean, you have memorable performances that probably stand out this season. You've got the wins against Chelsea and Spurs. You've got draws against Man City and Arsenal. You knocked Liverpool out of the FA Cup. That right there is like grounds for a solid season. I think it's also...
Liverpool's under 17s, to be fair.
I don't care. Still knocked them out. I think it's also worth noting that their defense has been solid. Compare what Fulham have gone through and how they've kind of tried to do the same thing and it has not worked.
Yeah.
Outside...
The weird thing is that is Wolves' championship defense, more or less, just elevated to the Premier League. And
there were questions because
who
did they get rid of Connor Cody?
No, Connor Cody's captain and still the central.
Barry Douglas is the one they got rid of.
Yes.
There were questions about getting rid of Barry Douglas because of all the kind of supply he brought in, the chances he created. They've been just fine to some extent. I'll say the defense right now has fewer goals conceded than every team outside of the top 4 except Leicester. So basically top 4, Leicester, and then Wolves in terms of their defense, which means that's a better defense than, imagine saying this at the beginning of the season, better defense than Manchester United, Arsenal, Everton, Bournemouth, Burnley. That's kind of a big deal. And they're 11 points clear of the relegation zone. So it's a solid season from that standpoint. The thing that I keep going back to and I would love to hear your thoughts on, I've said it before, is the erratic nature of this season. So I've broken it down like this. August 28th to October 6th, that's 10 games. 5 wins, 3 draws, 2 losses. Great. Then, October 20th to November 30th, in a month, 6 games, 0 wins, 1 draw, 5 losses. Then you have 3 straight wins. Now, from December 21st to now, 2 wins, 1 draw, 3 losses. And I don't get why they keep kind of having this doing really, really well, falling off for a month. Doing well, falling off for a month.
My feeling, I think we've talked about this before on the show, is that there are certain teams that just suit Wolves to play against, right? Like possession teams. I think it suits Wolves to play against them because they quite like to press, right? And one of the reasons I mentioned Jimenez, as well as just being a striker, he's really good at leading the press from the front in an energetic and sensible kind of way. So teams that will like want to have the ball, it suits Wolves to like press them, win it back, and go, right? Teams that want to sit back or teams that are quite well organised defensively, Wolves seem to struggle when they are the team with all the possession. So I think it basically just depends on the opposition, and even then, it's not like you're not guaranteed to beat any of those teams. So they're always in the game, but there's never anything you guarantee that they would win or guarantee that they would lose.
Let me ask you this, the Wolves expert then. Yeah. So when you're playing against a team that is more defensive, they're sitting off, say you've got Brighton at home. Wolves have Brighton at home. Brighton, you would assume, or Cardiff, better example. Cardiff at home, who I think they did actually lose to.
Yeah, like, Hoylett scored that goal, yeah.
See, there we go. So against a team that's sitting off and being bunkered, what do you think Wolves need? Like, what would be the shift in tactics that might maybe help them break through more readily?
I honestly don't know. It would just mean sort of higher quality players, essentially, right? We don't have Manchester City level players to break defenses down. And even as much as, again, Raul Jimenez, I think, is this great example of what Wolves are this season. Like, impressive at pressing, has impressive moments in terms of nice, smart passes. Has a few goals at this point, right? Had some
6 goals, top score.
6 goals, like some nice finishes, but has also missed a bunch of good chances as well. And had a couple of things where he's been one-on-one and sort of choked, right? So you don't have an absolutely ruthless striker, but you do have a hard-working striker who's easy to love. You know what I'm saying? So there's not that ruthlessness that you would have from a top striker or a top team.
And that's reflected in the fact that they have the fewest goals of any team in the top 13, like significantly fewer. So with that in mind, and given what we just said about West Ham, don't you feel like I'm phrasing this question poorly, so I apologize, but it seems to me that a big money offer for Marko Arnautovic wouldn't be the worst way to spend some money if you're Wolverhampton?
Ooh. He would absolutely destroy the wage structure, right? If he wants the type of money he was going to get in China and probably the type of money he's trying to leverage out of West Ham, I don't think that would make much sense.
I don't think so either, for exactly the reasons you listed. Same for Callum Wilson, who they're also linked with. It's supposed to be a bidding war between them and Chelsea.
I got quite excited about that. I think that would be a good setup. Do you think he would want too much money?
Well, I think my guess is that what you're going to see, maybe they end up putting in a big money offer for Callum Wilson or Arnautovic, but more likely is the one that they've been linked with was 21-year-old Ghana striker Benjamin Tete. Have you heard of him?
I'm not familiar with him.
Nor was I until yesterday. 6'4" striker from Sparta Prague, supposedly in the mold of Didier Drogba, which I think from the lazy transfer standpoint means he's big and strong and fast and can score goals.
Wait, there's a Didier Drogba mold?
Yeah, you didn't know that one?
More teams should use
just keep making it, right?
Yeah.
But it's, again, Sparta Prague, that feels like a player that you could spend a little bit of money on to bring in as opposed to spending £40 million on to bring in. And so maybe you keep bringing in younger players to see what they can do without having to drop too much money.
I wouldn't be against a Miguel Almiron bid from Wolves. If they had that money to bring in Almiron, I think he would offer something a little different in terms of an attacking player that could play in Wolves' front three and be part of the pressing system. It's also weird because I'm more familiar with him from living here. I'm not sure how much people back home know about him, but that would be a good fit for me.
I agree. I think that's a great shout. So Almiron, Wolves come in and hijack that one. Daryl would be very, very pleased.
The other thing I'm concerned about with Wolves is, I don't know if you saw the Man City game. Wolves lost 3-0. Willy Bolly, who is very important to that Wolves defence. He is sort of the go-to guy to win any headers that come in. He's also the go-to guy in terms of when Wolves pass the ball out of the back. He's the most composed. He's the most willing to take risks and 99% of the time get away with them so that it becomes a passive move instead of a desperate clearance. he's going to be suspended because he was sent off against Manchester City.
He was composed there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that wasn't a composed tackle, but he usually is. But the Wolves' defence has mostly been Ryan Bennett, Connor Cody, Willy Bolly as this back three that know each other really well, and I think that's been part of the success. So to suddenly lose probably the best player in that back three, I'm very curious about what happens with Wolves now. I'm not sure that any of the guys in reserve are of the same quality. And in a Harry Kane kind of way, I'm a bit worried about what happens without him.
Just go sign some more centre backs. You'll be fine.
Maybe. I mean, I would sort of like that to happen right now.
No, maybe
he's only suspended for a couple of games.
Yeah, it's fine. That's enough. And then I know transfers are made much more dramatic by the newspapers than like what actually happens in reality. But I did enjoy all the talk of Ruben Neves potentially being the replacement for Fernandinho at Man City.
Yeah.
Oh, and then it's like, they're playing each other, the replacement versus the tutor or whatever.
Yeah.
And now afterwards it was like, maybe he's not the replacement. So I know that that's like tabloid speculation. One game is not going to dissuade Man City. Mm-hmm. But I do think, I don't even know if this is a conspiracy theory. It's just a weird theory of mine. I think Wolves have way more money than we realize.
They have access to way more money than you realize. Yeah,
I think that's it. Because while you do see a few of their players linked with moves away, they're not really. And the one that keeps coming to mind is that Nuno, the manager, has not been linked with any vacancies.
He's halfway through a Premier League season.
He is, but he's halfway through bringing up a team from the Championship, doing so in a very convincing fashion, having already established a very good resume in Portugal, to then be where he is. It does feel like that's a name that when Eddie Howe first brought Bournemouth up and they looked as good as they did, Sean Dyche the same, you started seeing rumors linking them with people. You don't see that with Nuno, and I do wonder if a part of that is, we already have so much money, we don't really need your paltry sums.
Well, he's not at a club that he knows where the ceiling is, right?
Yeah.
Or at least maybe he does, but we don't, right? So, the ceiling may be a lot higher than you realise.
Yep.
Sort of like on Podcast Row.
There we go. That's a reference for the people who are at the coaching convention and no one else.
It's a very in-joke. But you know what I'm saying? Like, he might not be tempted to go somewhere else because it's not as if it's a small team that's gone as far as it can go. You know, that whole thing of he's taken them as far as they can go. I don't think Nuno thinks that's what's happened yet. Right. And hopefully it isn't what has happened yet. But for me, the interesting thing is, how do you get Wolves to that next stage, right? Like, I look at that central midfield. Ruben Neves, João Moutinho. João Moutinho, who, by the way, has been, I'm glad you mentioned him, he has been absolutely brilliant in terms of just coming in and sort of making that team. He's really combative, but he's also got an eye for a pass, like really smart player in terms of moving the ball around. I don't know how to improve that central midfield in a realistic way because I can't imagine players better than that playing for my team.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but then, well, first of all, you should because you will.
But that will be the next phase. Is can you get players better than the best players that have ever played for a team? That's a very, very odd feeling to try and think of it that way.
Man City has some thoughts for you.
I guess that was the progress of Manchester City.
Yeah, right? A little bit. So, I mean, I think it's probably finding understudies or people to kind of play similar roles that you can utilize in different situations. Mm-hmm. That would probably be the way they're going to go. But even so, I still say A- for Wolves.
A-. Okay, how about we just accept that and say A-.
Right. I'm good with that, especially because we kind of jokingly talked about at the beginning of the show, wouldn't it be hilarious if this show ended up being an hour and a half?
Oh, we should have subbed you out ages
very
ago.
much getting into the point where I should have been subbed, but we've run out of options.
Can I just say thank you to all the people at the convention who mentioned the Premier League midterm report shows, because we weren't sure how they were being received because we hadn't got as much response as we were kind of expecting, but everybody mentioned them when we met them at the convention. It made us realise that people have been really enjoying them.
Yes.
So thank you to all those people.
Including the people who I felt like were one tweet away from threatening bodily harm if we didn't release it sooner.
All right, you ready for the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network updates?
Sir.
All right, first update today comes from Mark Counterman, who is scouting Christian Kapis, the 19-year-old American midfielder for Hobro in Sweden, I believe. Mark says, despite not making any appearances for Hobro before the winter break, Christian was invited to the US Under-20 camp by Tab Ramos. So he's there right now, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Up next, we got Patrick Snyder scouting Nick. All right, we got a pronunciation guide on this one, which I cannot remember, so I'm going to do my best.
Nick himself, right?
Yes, Nick Taitigi, 19-year-old American attacking midfielder for Schalke. Nick scored off of an assist from Ayo Akinyola in the US U20s friendly versus the US U19s. He did miss a penalty, but by all accounts, put in a man-of-the-match performance.
Yeah, I've been hearing this, that Nick has been really standing out at that U20 camp. Pat Snyder, I think think we'll get the joke about the podcast row ceiling. Didn't we meet Pat Snyder on podcast row?
I believe we did.
All right. Russell Findlay is scouting Eric Palmer-Brown, 21-year-old American defender on loan at NAC Breda. He's on loan from Manchester City. Russell says this has not been a great loan spell for EPB. He started 7 of 17 possible games, and NAC have 2 wins and 5 losses in those matches. It might not all be Eric's fault, though, as Breda is second bottom of the Eredivisie with 4 wins total.
Yeah, I'd say probably not all his fault.
Mm-hmm. 1/11th his fault, maybe.
Yes. John Swartz scouting Gideon Zelalem, the 21-year-old American midfielder for Arsenal. Zelalem got his name on the score sheet for the Arsenal U23s. That's about as enthusiastic as my voice can go. He came on as a late substitute and scored the equalizer against Brighton's U23s in the 86th minute. It was the first time Zelalem scored in all competitions since his loan spell to Dutch side VVV Venlo nearly 2 years ago. He has fewer than 6 months remaining on his current deal with the Gunners.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens next. Zach Lindquist is scouting Jackson Ewell, the 21-year-old American midfielder for San Jose. Zach says Jackson Ewell has gone missing. After the season ended, he deleted all of his Instagram posts except for alone one of him in a gym and the bio, "In my cave, don't bother me." Interesting. Hopefully this means he's grinding away in an attempt to get into new manager Mateus Almeida's squad after 2 seasons on the fringes at San Jose. Exciting times at San Jose.
There we go.
With Mateus Almeida. Let's hope that Jackson Ewell can be part of it.
I would like that. I would like to hope that he is in his cave just working out. He's got to come out like roided out and ready to go. Maybe not roided out. That could be problematic.
Always gone off the grid.
Maybe that. That's a better way to put it. Michael Bates scouting Tiana Davidson, 20-year-old American defender for the Chicago Red Stars. On January 9th, Davidson announced that she would enter the NWSL college draft, where she was then selected with the first pick by the Red Stars.
We know, we were there.
We do. According to the Equalizer, we know them too. Davidson's decision to declare for the draft is directly tied to her 2019 World Cup prospects. Rumors are that Davidson will likely be an allocated player. Rumors are also that we recorded an interview with Jeff Kassouf of the Equalizer podcast while we were in Chicago. That episode will be out either later this week or early next week. But we talk about Tiana Davidson, NWSL draft, all things U.S. women's national team, and the Women's World Cup.
Yeah. Am I right in thinking that allocated player probably means that the U.S. Soccer Federation will pay her salary so it's not on the NWSL team? Yeah.
You are correct.
Richie Garcia is scouting Emerson Heineman, 22-year-old American midfielder for AFC Bournemouth. Richie says Emerson has not been in the 18 for any of Bournemouth's last 3 games. Richie's keeping his fingers crossed for a loan before January 31st.
Scott Gleick scouting Georgia Costa, the 18-year-old American midfielder for Boca Juniors.
Oh, I forgot we had a kid at Boca.
Yeah, we do. Acosta scored for Boca in their 1-0 victory over Aldo Civi in the Quinta Youth Division in Argentina. He was also called up to train with their reserve team during preseason for the first time on Monday, January 7th, and featured in a little promo video they did about the training. He turns 19 on the 19th of January.
Richard Rolson is scouting Ian Harkes, 23-year-old American midfielder for Dundee United. Richard says reports indicate that Harkes has signed a 2-year deal with Dundee United, who are currently 3rd in the Scottish Championship. After a season where Ian's playing time all but vanished for DC United, his contract was not picked up and he was given the opportunity to find a new team. Harkes is eligible for a British passport.
There we are. Go on, Ian. Final report of the day.
Get one while it's still worth something.
Yeah. Final report of the day comes from Eric Edston, scouting Callum Hudson-Odoi, the 18-year-old English winger for Chelsea. With injuries and fixtures piling up, Callum has started to get minutes for the Blues, with 2 assists and an overall great performance against Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup. He started at Wembley against Tottenham in the Carabao Cup semi-final first leg. He didn't perform quite as well, but should keep getting minutes unless Bayern's £35 million offer gets accepted.
My mind is still blown that Bayern were just willing to go to £35 million for a kid who's barely played any first team football.
They want what they want. And they've learned that the English youngster pipeline is worth tapping. And I think it was also announced today that Borussia Dortmund have officially declared that they will never sell Bayern another player.
Really?
So I think that's maybe part of it too. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Go find your player somewhere else, Bayern Munich. But seriously, how do Bayern know this much about Callum Hudson-Odoi? Where have they seen him play?
Maybe in the UEFA youth competitions, or maybe just from scouting, my friend.
Wow.
Just from scouting.
Maybe some Bielsa-ing.
Or because Chelsea are known to have 400 million academy players who could be loaned out at any given moment.
That could be.
Or maybe some Bielsa-ing.
If you'd like, thank you to everybody for the scouting reports. If you'd like to join the Scouting Network, you can do it at totalsoccershow.com/join. Thank you to everybody who has joined recently. We've had a lot of signups recently. It helps to support the Total Soccer Show so that we can keep on keeping on with the Total Soccer Show.
Yeah, it's going to help me go out and buy cough syrup.
Yes, that should be what you do next.
That's the plan.
Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. And we finally got our Premier League midterm reports finished.
We sure did, with my eyes watering. I'll just say right back at you, champ.
I feel like your teacher's talking about getting through the grading. Finally did it.
I am white-knuckling this chair right now. Yes.
All right, listeners, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.